All right, so this is the second card that we're gonna make, but similar to the first card, I'm going to change the colors up a little bit. So this one here, I did navy for the background color and then colored my images. For this particular version, I'm going to do white as the background color. So I'll show you how to do that there. So I've already got my cardstock prepped with my double-sided tape. I've got my die there taped down to where I want it to go, and I'm going to run it through my die cutting machine. Go. Let's get the machine out of the way. Now once again, I'm going to look at the back here. Any of the places that it's gone all the way through, I'm going to put a bit of tape on just to reinforce that there. There's another little bit right here that I'm going to reinforce a little bit. I don't think it's gone all the way through, but I'm going to do that there anyways. So similar to the first one, when you're taking it off, you want to be a little bit careful with the backing. However, for this particular version and this particular color, I want all these little pieces out first. So if some of those little pieces are stuck in your die, that's okay. We're going to be using them first anyway, so we will leave them out. What I'm going to do next is take the rest of them out. And this does get a little bit tedious, but it has to be done. One thing I forgot to mention in the first video is the glitter that I'm using is microfine glitter. It's really, really fine. You could do this same technique with a chunkier glitter. It's just going to have a slightly different look than my samples. But there's no reason that you couldn't use them if that's all you could find, or if that's what you already had that you wanted to try it. Just try it and see how it works, but it will be slightly different than the samples just because the glitter won't be as fine. And because we're taking all of these little pieces out, it should be fairly easy to keep track of exactly which pieces are still in and which ones are not. There's a slight difference between the color of the adhesive and the color of the backing, so that does make it a little bit easier. And I typically have a garbage can right nearby so that I can just pop all the little pieces inside the garbage can as I am going. So I try not to make a huge mess out of my workspace. Nearly there, about 2/3 of the way done. All right, I'm going to pause, finish this, and then come back. All of our bits are out, so we're going to put some of our white glitter down. Tap off the excess. Put that back in the container and close it so I don't accidentally knock it, because I tend to be a little bit of a klutz, and that would be the first thing I would do, would be knocking that. So I'm going to burnish my glitter along the adhesive so that it is completely stuck. Use my Swiffer to take the excess off. And we are going to use Copic markers to color our glitter. Now, this is the only instance where the Copic blender pen actually blends the Copic out. So we are going to use it to blend it out onto the rest of the glitter, and that way we've got some light areas and some dark areas, and that's how we're getting the shading in our glitter there. Now, this works really, really well with Copic markers, alcohol-based markers. Doesn't work so well with dye-based markers. And by saying that, what I mean is you could do this technique with dye-based markers, but I don't recommend it, and here's why. Firstly, the tips aren't nearly as high quality as they are with the Copic markers. So the chances of wrecking your tips while you're doing this is very high. The other reason is alcohol-based ink dries really well on a non-porous surface, which is what the glitter is. Dye-based ink does not. So while I've tried this technique with the Tombow marker simply because, well, it was to prove someone wrong. Years ago when this technique came out, or I learned about it, someone told me that you could do it exactly the same with a dye-based marker as you could with the alcohol-based marker. And you could do the technique, but the dye-based ink never dried on the glitter. So for weeks afterwards, I was able to pick up ink off of the glitter. And as I was picking up ink, it was fading the ink. So between colors with the Copic marker with the blender pen, you want to scribble onto some scrap paper, make sure that I don't have any green left on there, because if I have green on there, I'm going to mix it with the red. So like I said, with dye-based markers, you could do this technique, but it doesn't dry on there. So for weeks afterwards, you're able to lift the ink up, which is not what you're wanting, not the look we're going for. And with the alcohol-based markers, you don't lift the ink up at all. It dries perfectly, and then you can do whatever you want. You can rub it or touch it as much as you want without having to worry about the ink being lifted. So you can see I am putting my ink, my color, where I want it to be the darkest, and then I'm going in and I'm using my blender pen to blend that out, and that's how we're getting some highlights and we're getting some shading in our images. And for the berries, I typically do a few at a time, because even if the ink dries, the blender pen will rehydrate it. And as you saw with the leaves, I did one whole side at a time. So it gets done really, really quickly, because you can do several areas at one time without worrying about the ink drying. And even if a little bit of this ink seeps in underneath with the adhesive, it's okay. It's still going to look really pretty. There we go. So the red is done, and I noticed as I was coloring the red that I missed a tiny, tiny, tiny little bit of a green section. So I'm just cleaning off my brush here, adding a little ink there, and then I'm going to blend that out. So the main thing is to make sure between colors that you clean out your blender pen and make sure that it's completely clear. And you can do images that have more than 2 colors. I just wanted to do something simple but effective. So now I'm taking this backing piece off, and I'm going to put that same glitter I put on the front all over that exposed adhesive. Tap the excess off. Put this in the container. So the glitter that I'm using, like I said, it's a microfine glitter, and the brand that I'm using, I'm not sure if it even exists anymore, but there's a bunch of different brands that I look to check and see if you can still get microfine glitter, and you can get them from a bunch of different companies. You'll find a link on the supply list to where you can get some that will work for these techniques here. All right, so we've got this all burnished beautifully. So isn't that pretty? Exactly the same image, just a little bit different colors, and it totally works. Now, because I've used different colors for this, I'm not going to put it on a navy background, because I want to make sure that the berries are highlighted, as well as the fact that there's no navy on this image. So I'm doing it on a few different colors than, or a different color than my original sample. Take the backing off of this tape here, because we're going to use that to glue our card down. There we go. There we go, and we could put this card this way or this way, either way works. But such a beautiful technique to use with your dies, with your glitter, and with your Copics. We'll see you in the next video.